Hello and welcome back to the Lowdown, everybody. And look who's joining myself and Mikey McCubbin today. Mr. Joe Tomlinson back in the building. Hey,
Hello,
Joe.
mate. Yes, in no way a last-minute call-up.
No.
First name on the transfer deal sheet, I heard.
We were delighted to call you up. We had a last-minute sickness withdrawal. But, Joe, what a substitute to have.
I'm ready to go, mate.
And it is the final week of the transfer window. So, guys, we're talking about the signing your club has to make before the deadline. Mikey, why don't you kick us off with your first transfer that has to be done before the deadline?
Okay, so I'm kicking off big.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kicking off at Man United. Patrick Dorgu, as we record this, looks like that's done and dusted. So great stuff there. I think, especially if it's a £25 million fee with around 4 million in add-ons, we're led to believe. I think that's good business. I think that's it's slightly better than what the kind of 45 million euro mark that was being touted just a few days ago. They've got it done with days to spare of the window. You can't expect Dorgu to come in and just, transform this United team. He's so young, but he is exactly the kind of profile that Ruben Amorim needs. So I think that's good. And also, luckily for myself, I wasn't going to suggest a left wing back anywhere. I think the left wing back chat was almost overly dominating. It felt, it was getting to that point where I think people were in danger of being like, that's all that United need. And actually, as we've seen in the last few weeks, United desperately need central midfield power and finesse as well, I think, in there. Because, Ugarte and Kobe, while they certainly have the legs to be able to fit an Amorim system, I think as a pairing, they're just a little bit mismatched. I think Ugarte needs someone. He needs a progressive passer next to him, because Ugarte isn't that, has never really been that. And Kobe Mainoo certainly isn't that either. And I think we've seen that from him. It's easy to forget he's just 19 years old. Like, really, he shouldn't be starting every single week anyway in a United team, especially in a United team which now requires that second central midfielder to do so much work. So I think, he's come under undue pressure.
Were you tempted by dropping Bruno back into there?
Well, I think that's a general temptation, but then United's attack just isn't good enough right now for Bruno to drop back there. Sure, Bruno is, he often does drop deep anyway to compensate, and he would certainly do a fine job as being that central ball progressor. But the fact is that you need him in that front three. Like, there just isn't enough creativity in that front three without him. Amad Diallo is a great all-round attacker, but United need him there for the goals. You need someone who's going to provide there. You need someone who's going to, try and unlock things for whoever plays at centre forward. And Bruno is that guy. There's not enough creativity coming from the wing backs. There's barely enough attacking play coming from the wing backs right now. So right now, Bruno, I think, has to be in that front three. So in the midfield, I have gone for someone who I think is gettable this week and has also been linked with Man City as well. Former Man City player Douglas Luiz at Juventus. Okay. Now, I think on loan, it is a possibility, right? I think a permanent move at this point, it's hard to see how that would happen given the outlay that Juve spent on Douglas Luiz last summer, 51 million euros. But this is a guy who's massively out of favour under Thiago Motta. Yeah, injuries have been a problem this season, but before he got injured, he wasn't a regular starter. Since he's come back from injury, he's not been a regular starter. Khéphren Thuram and Manuel Locatelli are very much first choice there. And it doesn't even feel like Douglas Luiz is really, even second in the pecking order behind them. Coop Miners is very much first choice in that number 10 position, so you don't even see potential for Douglas Luiz to have a more advanced position in that midfield, even though I think he can offer something in the final third too. So yeah, it feels like an opportunity for Man United here. Like someone who's got Premier League experience, is a great ball progressor, also has the physicality to match as well. He's not a defensive midfielder, but he's very used. He thrives best when he's playing alongside a destroyer, as we saw alongside Camara at Aston Villa. So yeah, I think he kind of fits the bill for me. Like, and also you need someone who's a bit more experienced in that midfield as well, because Ugarte's still fairly young too. So yeah, that's who I've gone for.
Joe, I mean, you're the United fan. Does that interest you?
I would be really surprised to see him leave Juventus. I'm not going to lie. Like, I know he's been out of favour and the injuries have been there, but the idea of Juventus accepting a 40 million, 50 million pound error after 3 to 4 months and agreeing to let him leave on loan, I think would puzzle me a little bit. I think maybe if he was going to go permanently, but I just don't see United wanting to do loan deals, particularly under Ineos. I would be really surprised to see that happen. I think part of what made some of the decision making previously in January windows so irritating for Manchester United fans, or at least me, was sort of short-term loan deals, trying to get things done that were then going to end like prematurely. I think Douglas Luiz will be slightly different to that because he's still 26 years old and certainly has the numbers we've seen in the Premier League. But I don't know. I would be a little bit surprised to see Douglas Luiz.
If there was a loan deal with an option to buy, say, for 50 million euros, right? Would you not think Juventus would be more tempted by that? The potential to make their money back, given that he's so out of favour. United, not pressured into signing him, but it gives him a real impetus to impress under Amorim.
Maybe with an option to buy, I could see it, but it doesn't feel very Ineos. It doesn't feel very Amorim. I don't know. I like Douglas Luiz and I really liked him at Aston Villa, but the profile of player I think Manchester United need in that midfield, I think they need to be like hyper athletic. Like they've got to really be able to shift up and down the pitch. Is what United have struggled with most. Manu Ugarte, great destroyer, but he is not the most athletic player at covering ground. The same can be said of Kobe, the same can be said of Bruno. I think United needs somebody in that midfield who is just an absolute athletic demon. And I think that's part of the reason that Dorgu has been signed in that left wing-back slot. We know all about his physicality, how willing he is to drive up and down the pitch continuously. The midfield lacks a player like that can just dominate teams physically. And I don't know whether Douglas Luiz is that guy. I think he would be a good short-term option and it would be a fine signing. I wouldn't be kicking up a fuss. But, we've heard endlessly Amorim talk about our need to compete physically. We're not able to compete physically. We get overrun physically. Does Douglas Luiz shift the dial physically for that Manchester United midfield? I'm not sure it does.
Yeah, I think they're unlikely to let him go in January on loan as well. I think if someone offered them their money back straight up, I think they'd 100% take it. But just given the fact that they are likely to finish in the Champions League playoff spots as well, they've got more games coming up. They've got the Champions League race in Serie A, which is still not outside of the question, even though their recent form hasn't been as good. And they kind of need players that can pop up with goals in games as well, which Douglas Luiz can, because they've kind of lacked attacking spark at times this season. And Colawani scored on his debut at the weekend, but I don't think they'll let him go personally.
So are you suggesting a United player as well?
I'm not. No, we're taking different clubs, and you have to suggest which of these signings is most likely to happen before the end of January.
Okay, I'm surprised they'd be suggested a striker for Man United.
I just think with United, obviously Højlund has been so far from his potential this season. And Xerxes, still yet to look like a consistent fit in this side, but they at least do have options there, whereas I think just the midfield options are so thin. I think if Toby Collier had more starts under Amorim so far and wasn't just being brought off the bench, then I would be more confident to look elsewhere in that United team and think, maybe this is where they upgrade. But the early signs of that, it's kind of like Mainu and Ugarte. It just feels like they're going to be the only ones who start, and I just think it's the most important part of this team. Like that middle four with the wing backs and the midfield are the most important part. Like the defense, obviously, there's enough depth there. The attack, I just think it's too expensive to upgrade in January. And even in midfield, that's kind of why I went for Douglas Luiz, because it's just who else is out there? Who is that physical specimen who's actually available in January? Who those kinds of players just seem to be too important. And I don't think anyone would have guessed that Douglas Luiz would be almost surplus to requirements just 6 months into his time at Juve. So it just feels like an opportunity buy rather than the perfect player for Amorim.
Okay, let's move on to Spurs, because they have, even more so than United, had a terrible recent period. They are now 15th in the Premier League. They are closer to relegation than even the top half. Who saw this coming after they beat Man City 4-0 at the Etihad? Since then, they've won 1 of 11 games. They've lost 8. They've lost to sides like Everton. They've lost to sides like Leicester at the weekend, as well as being sort of routinely battered by sides that would be around them as well, not turning up in that Arsenal game whatsoever. they've taken 5 points from those 11 games. Only Southampton have taken fewer. Their injury list is obviously extensive. Solanke is out until March, and I think a lot of people, it seems like the club are focusing on a striker. For me, I think that's the wrong area to target, because Richarlison's now back. You've got Son that can play centrally as well. It won't be too long before Brennan Johnson's back. Timo Werner's back in a couple of weeks as well. I think they can muddle through an attack. And also, you look at this side, their goals record's very solid. It's at the other end of the pitch for me. And no club in the Premier League at the moment has more players out injured than Spurs, which has to be considered. But their level of performance shouldn't be this bad, given the players that are still available as well. And I think a core reason for that is that they didn't strengthen at centre-back in the summer. You know, Dragassin's their only senior backup in that position. They've got Ben Davies who can play there. But it's turned to Archie Gray, a player who'd never played in central defence, according to Ange Postecoglou himself, before this run of games. And poor guy, I think he's done pretty well in a lot of them, but he's clearly not a centre-back whatsoever. So I'm looking for a centre-back, and the guy I'm suggesting is Bafoussé Diakité. He is a 24-year-old Lille centre-back, and what I like about Diakité is he can play at centre-back, he can play at right-back, he can play at left-back as well. He came through the Toulouse Academy, which is the same academy that produced Jean-Claire Todibo. It's the same one that created Manu Kone as well. He signed for €3 million in 2022, which I think is important to note from a Lille perspective. Imagine the potential financial upside if they sell him for, say, 25 or 30 in the next few days. I don't think he's the sort of calibre or name of player just yet that will mind being a backup when Van de Ven and Romero are out. But we've seen how many injuries and how many suspensions Romero picks up. There are minutes to be played there as well. Lille are an amazing developer of talent. They developed Yoro, Baleba, Amadou Onana, Sven Botman in recent seasons, all of which have largely worked in the Premier League as well. He started 29 games in his first campaign there. He started 15 last year. There was a few more injury issues. But this year, haven't seen any of those injuries whatsoever. He hasn't missed a single game. 3 goals and 1 assist to his name. He's a brilliant passer, which is what I liked for this Spurs side. Because in the past, in recent weeks, particularly on Twitter, I've suggested players, and Spurs fans have come back at me being like, he's not good enough on the ball.
Skriniar.
He's not good enough against the high line as well. I still think Skriniar would have been a worthwhile option for a 4th choice centre-back on loan. But a lot of Spurs fans disagreed, and whatever, I'll eat my humble pie if I have to. But Diakité, an amazing passer on the ball, completes 94% of his passes this season. That's the same as Kim Min-jae playing for a Bayern side that see all the ball in the Bundesliga. He's winning 65% of his aerial duels, 72% of his ground duels. He can play as a right back, he can play as a left back despite being right-footed. And I think that's just such a useful player to have in your squad. Only, I think at the moment, he's valued around €30 million. It feels achievable. Lille do sell. And especially Ligue 1 clubs, they've got to be careful with their finances. I could actually see this happening.
I think this is an interesting one, isn't it? Because I totally agree that the defensive portion of the pitch is where Spurs should be targeting. I think also potentially a number 6 is very easily identifiable as a problem in this Tottenham side. Basuma and Bentancur have both done jobs there, but don't feel like the most natural fits there. I think the Leicester second goal at the weekend was a prime example of positionally players not playing where they want to play, far too much room around the edge of the box. El Khanous gets 15 yards of travel before getting a shot off. But I think if you're going to sign a centre-back, does it not need to be a left footer? I look at the way Tottenham line up with Dragassin being the backup to Romero, but we don't really see a left-sided centre-back being able to back up Mickey van der Ven, and we don't specifically see much support for a doggy at all. I know Jed Spencer's played there. It's out of position. It's not his ideal fit. Reguilon, I don't know what he has to do to get a minute. Players are literally dead on their feet out there, and he's not coming on, is he? So clearly he's not fancied. A doggy is injured himself. So I wonder if Tottenham will target sort of a Gvardiol-style left-sided defender who can operate as a left back, left centre back, hybrid, something like that. They're not easy to find, but I certainly think the defensive issues stand out for Spurs.
I think Sky Sports News were reporting this morning, at least it got sent around in one of those transfer emails that we get, that they looked at David Hansko of Feyenoord, that they looked at Oliver Boscagli as well, who plays for PSV, left-sided centre-back as well, really amazing. Both of them are really amazing passers, can play at left-back as well. Someone like Piero Hincapié would be amazing at Bayer Leverkusen. I just don't see him leaving in January. If they're already losing Boniface as well, that's 2 kind of key members of their squad.
I think Boscagli is potentially out of contract in the summer as well. But I don't know whether he offers... I don't know whether he'd offer the steal. I think I suggested him for Wolves earlier in the window, but on reflection, if you want someone who's going to come in and just add, really fill in and add steel and be able to adapt quickly to the Premier League, I feel like Bashagli would be a little bit of a risk. Whereas I think maybe Diakité, especially like you say, coming from Lille, who have a good pipeline to the Premier League, would be a better stylistic fit for sure.
Right, I'm going to quickly talk about Wolves and then we'll get into some quick fires. basically the player I was very prepared to sign or suggest that Wolves sign, Axel Disasi, looks like he's going to go to Villa. There's still talks that it might go to Wolves, but I think Disasi to Villa feels more likely. He's being used as that backup to the likes of Konza and Pau Torres, and now Mings has got injured. They did need to sign another one because Diego Carlos has left the club. And look, Wolves' points and performances have slightly dried up under Vitor Pereira. He got off to that amazing start, beat United and Leicester in his first 2 games, then got a draw in his third. And in his next 3 games, he got Villa, Liverpool and Bournemouth. Not a time to be playing them. They just dropped into the relegation zone as well. Yeah. And whilst their attack, I think with Juan, with Cunha, if he stays, there's no guarantee of that. But I don't think Cunha's going to leave.
I reckon he will stay.
Well, let's see. Hopefully that hasn't aged by the time this goes out. Cunha, Juan, Strand Larsen as well. They've got forwards, in my opinion. They need another centre-back. Disasi would have been perfect. And I've got a very bold shout that they go and sign Eric Garcia from Barcelona, at least on loan. Look, swapping Barcelona for Wolverhampton is not a move that he'll be keen to make whatsoever. But Barcelona have Koundé, they've got Christensen, they've got Araujo, they've got Inigo Martinez, they've got a number of centre-backs that can play that. Koundé's obviously been used as a right-back this season. He's probably been the best right-back in the world in the last 2 months, maybe since Trent's had a
Hasn't Hansi Flick poo-pooed this move, though? I thought Eric Garcia was going to leave.
He's actually played a lot more recently. But it feels like they do need to sell either Eric Garcia or another sort of fringe player to be able to make any movement in the transfer.
You're a madman here. You know this. Eric Garcia to Wolves, pal.
Eric Garcia to Wolves, it's a maverick move.
Yeah,
it's
you're
a maverick move. But he's
man.
got Premier League experience and he does really raise the level of that centre-back position that they've got at Wolves at the moment, because Agbadou played amazingly well for Wolves against Arsenal after a really tricky debut against Chelsea. I thought he was brilliant at the weekend. Their current 3 centre-backs at the moment are Agbadou, Bueno and Doherty playing on the right side of the centre-back.
Kevin Danso incoming, mate.
Kevin Danso potentially.
Impact.
Yeah, that is potential. Let's see whether that goes through. He's obviously had that spell at Southampton in the past, which didn't go that well. He's played much, much better for Lens this season. But Eric Garcia, I think, really raises the level of that club. Will he want to go to Wolves and leave Barcelona mid-season? No. But could Barcelona...
You have to drag him there by his hair. Honestly, you would have to literally shackle the guy and send him on a prison plane to get into Wolverhampton.
I wanted to suggest Disasi. I actually think Disasi's a better player than he's shown at Chelsea. I think he'd be fairly solid in the middle of a back 3 at Wolves, where he's just a very limited role. In wide open spaces at Chelsea, I think he's really struggled.
Honestly, I think Disasi, he may well be at Aston Villa by the time this goes out, but in some ways, I think he's a better stylistic fit than Garcia anyway.
Totally.
Wolves need a physical defender. Like it's a three at the back. It doesn't matter with Wolves who's going to be distributing out the back. Really, like they need to just lock down the defence. Eric Garcia, I don't know,
you're
man.
a madman. That's
immediately
coming bottom of the
It's
shouts.
an amazing long range passer, but like it has reputation ruining potential.
Yeah, leaving Catalonia.
And then going to Wolves and then getting overrun in that Wolves defence and getting relegated. I just think
that's immediately coming bottom.
I rolled the dice. He's also went to Girona on loan last year. Like he's
staying
in Barcelona. He's obviously in Barcelona. But he's as I keep on saying,
I rate him.
I don't think Eric Garcia wants to go to Wolves. I'm saying Barcelona might want to sell him to Wolves. No. Or maybe loan him.
No.
Let's see. It's a long shot. Maybe I went a bit rogue, guys.
To be fair, it's a hard one with Wolves anyway, because they have already made moves to shore up that defence.
It looks like Danso's coming in as well.
R.I.P. Lens's backline, man.
I know.
Kushnoff and
Brice Samba
as well has already left as well. It's really
this is one thing as well. I forgot to raise it on the transfer show that came out the other day with Mathys. Like, where were Chelsea when Brice Samba was like leaving Lens there? He would have been an amazing, at least, stopgap in goal for them. Like,
don't even think about Chelsea's goalkeepers. It's such a mess. It's such a mess. Right, guys, let's get into some of these other moves that have been talked about in the last few days. Let's get the thoughts of all 3 of us. Angel Gomes to Spurs. So apparently Spurs are leading the chase for him. Might be one for the summer when his contract's up. You were talking about the fact they needed a defensive midfielder, Joe.
Yeah.
Is he the right sort of profile for Spurs, or is he another sort of technical, less physical
He's
player?
an amazing technical player. We all know about his ability on the ball, his progressive pass numbers, his general ball retention, the volume of passes he's putting up a game in France, all absolutely exceptional. And we've seen it in his very limited time in an England shirt. Do I think... I'm not convinced about the move to Spurs, to be honest with you. Specifically in that number 6 role, I think physicality could be a problem for him. I know small technical players absolutely have a place in the Premier League, but the way the Premier League has shifted at the absolute elite level now is really physical.
It's
like
big boys.
it's very, very high pressure. It's very much built on 6'2", technically amazing players. And I think Angel Gomes can compete. Absolutely can compete at that level, as he's shown at international level. Technically amazing. Do I think it's moves the dial for Tottenham in that number 6 role? Not particularly. I could see Angel Gomes going to a club like West Ham, where the expectations are slightly lower, the intensity is definitely lower. This is a Tottenham team that play maybe the most intense system in the Premier League, which is part of the reason all the players are injured all the time. I think this would be... I'm not sure about this fit.
Yeah, I agree.
I'd like to see him aim higher than West Ham, though, to be honest. I think he is a Europa League, Champions League level player. I mean, he's proved it for Lille over the last 4 seasons since he's been there. I wonder whether a club like Villa would have a look at him.
I'd stay out of England if I was Angel Gomes. Honestly, I would stay out of England. I'd be looking at moves to Spain, staying in France. Like, I don't necessarily think Premier League is the best fit for Angel Gomes.
Fair enough. Okay, Casemiro to Roma, Mikey. Are you just happy to rub your hands and say arrivederci?
Yeah, I mean, this one would be a mad one to happen late in the window, but apparently all parties are open to it. I mean, if it could lead to a permanent move in the summer, the problem is, again, it's just like with all of United's most sellable assets, they've got huge wages, and so are Roma willing to even stump up some of his wages? It basically depends on that, doesn't it? Like, I think it has to be, for it to be worth it for United, there has to be a real PSR advantage to it. If Roma can cover like a fair amount of his wages, then I think it's worth it. If they can't, then there's not really much point, and United, he may as well be a depth option until the summer. As from a Roma perspective, like, I think Casemiro, I think that, there's been so much chat over the last year of Casemiro, like football's caught up with him too much. I think that's slightly premature. I think the Premier League, and especially a Man United team, which has its midfield structure has been all over the shop for 10 years. I think it's a hard place to state your authority. And actually, in his first season, he was pretty excellent. So I think a move elsewhere, a move to Italy. Again, Roma's midfield has been pretty messy over the last few years, but I think he will be far more comfortable there than in the Premier League. So I think for the player it would be a good move for sure.
Yeah, it's a great move for Casemiro for sure. Probably play alongside Manu Kone, who's obviously a real athlete as well. That could really suit him. Pellegrini's more technical in front. Dybala's still there as well. So let's see what happens. Tyler Dibling to Spurs is one that's been talked about according to the Telegraph. Looks like one more for the summer. Personally, I want to see him go to Leipzig. I wouldn't go to Spurs if I was Tyler Dibling.
Leipzig?
Yeah.
I would avoid
They've
Leipzig.
always got a plan.
Didn't have a plan for Emil Smith-Rowe. Ademola Lookman.
Emil Smith-Rowe has talked really positively about his time there.
He played about 9 games. Didn't have a plan for Lookman.
He was about 19.
Yeah, Dibling's 18.
Look at Szoboszlai, look at Nkunku, look at Gvardiol. It's a good place for young players. It's a good place. I just don't think Tyler Dibling's going to play enough at Spurs. And you're joining a club where...
It's not a good place for English players, though, Leipzig. Nearly every English player that's gone there has been a failure.
Is that not just
Smith-Rowe, Fabio Carvalho?
None of these
players have worked out
coincidence. I would back Leipzig to have a better plan for my development than a Spurs side where I'll be playing second fiddle to Son for a year and potentially under a new manager.
I disagree. I think Spurs is a much better fit. I think if you look at Tyler Dibling, he was part of the Chelsea academy for 6 months, went back because he was homesick to Southampton. I think that speaks volumes about a player who doesn't necessarily want to travel a million miles away from his like home. And I think
that man experienced the world.
Get over there to East Germany. Leipzig on paper classically have had great development paths for players, but I think English players have gone over there and consistently struggled. I think
there's only been 2.
There's a third player as well. I'm trying to think of
Ademola Lookman.
Well, he's
Nigerian, isn't it? Yeah. Emil Smith-Rowe,
Fabio
Carvalho.
I mean, what do we get?
But players who've come through the English system
have struggled over there. Yeah, and I also think that Tottenham, although we can say, he plays second fiddle to Son, I don't necessarily think that's true. He wants to play the majority of his football on the right-hand side of the pitch, doesn't he? Where I think there is potentially space for him. I know that Kulusevski is amazing there, but we've seen him utilised centrally to great effect this season as well. We've seen Archie Gray pick up about 25 appearances already this season. Bergval's playing every minute of every game.
Central defence.
Yeah, but that's absolutely fine. If Dibling was playing as a 10, 25 games next season for Tottenham, that would be absolutely remarkable.
He's not going to play ahead of Kulusevski and Maddison. He's not going to play on the right ahead of Johnson or Kulusevski. I think you can go get immediate football at Leipzig and further your development quicker than sitting on the bench for a year at Spurs in that pressure cooker. I just think he looks like a phenomenal player, but I'd go and play regularly. I think he's really benefiting from the fact he's picked week in, week out.
The only thing is I don't see Leipzig matching Southampton's valuation.
£55 million.
Yeah, it feels like he has to go to Premier League. Also, if it gets to the summer, Southampton going down, there's no chance they get £55 million for him. I don't think.
Well, they got £55 million for Lavia.
They get 55. They get
55 million. 55 million is the record.
God. Wow,
that was a championship move.
Yeah.
Either way, let's move on to Bayer Leverkusen, because they're having a bit of a crazy last week of the window. Boniface looks like he's going to Saudi Arabia. Real shame, in my opinion. You shouldn't go to Saudi Arabia in your mid-20s. Look, I know the money's amazing, but you're a top player. Shouldn't be doing that. Hermoso going to Bayer Leverkusen on a free. James McAtee was linked. Doesn't look like it's going to happen now, but Emi Buendia's in talks with Bayer Leverkusen. What are you making of the whole Bayer Leverkusen situation?
Ferguson.
Yeah.
Evan Ferguson as well. I nearly forgot to mention.
Of course, Evan Ferguson. That would be a genuinely incredibly exciting move for Evan Ferguson. I mean, to take on the mantle left by Boniface, I mean, pretty mad. I mean, obviously Patrick Schick's there as well. You're going to be behind Schick. But still, there is a route there, right? There is a route. I think Emi Buendia feels like a depth option, doesn't he? Feels like almost like a kind of Wirtz backup. Can also play in midfield, can play on the wing. Would you trust him at wing back? I'm not so sure, but a decent bench option. I think Buendia, like, he's very hard working, would fit. I think would fit what Xabi Alonso wants. But yeah, Evan Ferguson, I think that would be a super exciting move for him. I think he's in need of a jolt. He's in need of, I don't know, just an uptick in his career, game time, a new scenery around him. I think that the Bundesliga could be the place for him.
Worked for Teller, didn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I think it's attractive how it's only a loan as well, because in 6 months, maybe Xabi Alonso's at Real Madrid, maybe Florian Wirtz is leaving, maybe that project is slightly teetering, but 6 months in Germany where you're going to play more than you are at Brighton for a club competing at the top end of the Bundesliga, I think that's great.
I think this could be a permanent deal. I think Brighton are really willing to let him go on a permanent deal for the right price, is what I've read in The Athletic. And if that's the case, then that is a big jump, isn't it? I mean, it's a juicy move. That's one of the funnest moves.
We were linking him to Southampton a few weeks ago. Now he's going to bloody Bayer Leverkusen.
Yeah.
Mad.
Huge.
Very, very, impressive if that one happens. Juan Foyth to Aston Villa, Joe.
Well, he's worked with Unai Emery an awful lot in the past, hasn't he? Which is clearly where this link has come from. I think the fact he can play as a right back as well, that versatile option, helps him.
If you have Disasi and Foyth on the table, who are you?
I think if you're Unai Emery, you probably come down with Foyth, because at the end of the day, he's worked with them and he knows exactly what he's going to get out of him. And Foyth knows the system that Unai Emery's operating with. Disasi for a 6-month loan deal might end up being a better player in the long run, but equally that 6 months might be an adaptation period to learn the system that you don't have to get out of Foyth. It feels to me just like cover anyway, and the wages are almost definitely going to be less with Juan Foyth. I would definitely side with Foyth.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Also played. I guess him and Pau Torres were part of the same team, right? At Villarreal. There's a bit of a connection there. So important when you're coming into a new league. If you to have connections you're already used to. I mean, I say that Badiashile and Disasi haven't worked so far at Chelsea, and they were amazing together at Monaco. But yeah, I think I'd probably agree. I think Foyth there, especially he doesn't have to. Yeah, but I mean, it is kind of dire at Villa. Since the Mings injury, they don't really have any fit centre backs. So I wouldn't actually be surprised if both went. Yeah,
interesting. Yeah. Fair enough. And it's impossible to do any content this month without mentioning his name. Marcus Rashford to Fenerbahçe, Mikey.
Here we go. I mean, I don't know what you guys think. I mean,
the options are getting thin on the ground for him.
Options are getting thin. It's just the idea of Rashford linking back up with Jose Mourinho.
It's not happening.
I just didn't have that on my bingo card.
He doesn't have a lot of options.
Fenerbahçe, no.
I agree. I wouldn't go to Fenerbahçe, but he can't stay. Barcelona doesn't feel like it's on the table. Dortmund's gone a bit quiet as we record this, at least.
Harbour no manager.
Milan have already brought in Kyle Walker, so they can't bring in Rashford as well. Where is he going?
I think this has just been far too talked about at this stage. Marcus Rashford, honestly, I think he'll end up staying at Man United.
Yeah, and what? Just rotting.
And there'll either be conciliations made, or he will end up, effectively not playing an awful lot across the next 6 months. I would be really surprised at this stage. If this happens, if anything happens to Rashford, it's going to happen deadline day. It's going to be very late.
But that's where I think actually a link like this, and look, it seems like
happened
an
to
outrageous
Osman,
story.
to be fair, didn't it?
Well, this is it. I think the reporting around it And this isn't necessarily insider knowledge from inside Fenerbahçe, but the fact that the vice presidents downplayed it, but also said you never know, anything could happen. And like the reporting around it has kind of been that they could do something similar to Osimhen. Like the transfer window in Turkey doesn't the deadline isn't until the 11th of February, so there's a little bit more time there, a bit more leeway.
Besiktas.
So
Ollie.
But like, oh yeah, of course. Now that would be
if it doesn't close to 11th and he doesn't move to deadline day. If nothing happens on deadline day, I can see Ollie's name being linked heavily with Marcus.
Yeah. So that I think that if there is a game plan, if this is being spoken about at Fenerbahçe, then that feels like what the game plan would be. Like wait until the situation is desperate, similar to Osimhen, and then pounce.
Okay, well, no doubt you'll be hearing plenty about it in the final week of the window, guys. Thank you so much for watching the Lowdown for this week. Huge thanks to Mikey and Joe. Stay tuned for more transfer content before the deadline on Monday, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.